Machu Picchu. In the middle of the 15th century, high in the Andes Mountains of present-day Peru, an extraordinary city of stone was constructed on a narrow ridge nearly 2,400 meters above sea level. Surrounded by steep cliffs and dense cloud forest, it stood in a location so remote that even reaching it today requires winding mountain paths and long climbs through the jungle. This city was Machu Picchu. Built by the Inca civilization at the height of its power, it contained temples, ceremonial spaces, agricultural terraces, and an intricate water system that flowed through the entire settlement. Yet the most astonishing part of Machu Picchu is not simply its location or its beauty. It is the mystery surrounding its construction and its disappearance. Massive granite blocks, some weighing several tons, were cut and fitted together with extraordinary precision. There was no mortar between them, no iron tools, and no wheeled transport animals capable of hauling such stones up the mountainside. Nevertheless, the walls of Machu Picchu were assembled so perfectly that even today a thin blade can hardly slip between the stones. For a brief moment in history, this mountaintop city thrived above the clouds. Then, not long after it was built, it was suddenly abandoned. After the fall of the Inca Empire in the 16th century during the Spanish conquest of South America, many Inca cities were destroyed, occupied, or rebuilt by colonial authorities. But Machu Picchu followed a different fate. It was never burned, never dismantled, and apparently never even discovered by the Spanish armies moving through the region. Instead, the city simply faded out of recorded history. Over the centuries, the jungle slowly reclaimed it. Moss and vines spread across the stone walls. Terraces filled with wild vegetation and thick cloud forest concealed the structures from distant view. For nearly 400 years, Machu Picchu remained hidden in the Andes, known only to a few local farmers living in the surrounding valleys. The wider world had no idea that an entire Inca city was preserved almost intact above the Urubamba River Canyon. That changed in 1911 when American explorer Hiram Bingham traveled through the region searching for lost Inca sites. Guided by local villagers, he climbed a steep mountain ridge and pushed through dense vegetation until stone walls suddenly appeared beneath the foliage. What he found astonished him. Hidden beneath layers of jungle growth was a nearly complete ancient city, untouched by centuries of conflict and almost forgotten by history itself. Machu Picchu had slept in silence for generations. Once archaeologists began to study the site in detail, its engineering revealed an even deeper level of sophistication. The construction technique used in many of the most important buildings is known as ashlar masonry, where stones are cut so precisely that they lock together without the need for mortar. Each block was shaped individually so that it matched the stones around it like pieces of a complex puzzle. This precision was not merely aesthetic. It created a structure capable of surviving earthquakes. The Andes are a seismically active region, and during tremors the stones of Machu Picchu can shift slightly and then settle back into place without collapsing. Many buildings in the area have fallen over the centuries, but the carefully fitted walls of Machu Picchu have endured. Yet this raises a significant question. The Inca civilization did not use iron tools capable of cutting granite with ease. Instead, they relied on harder stones and simple metal alloys such as bronze. How then were they able to shape such dense rock with such extraordinary accuracy? Transporting these stones is equally puzzling. The Inca did not use the wheel for construction, and the steep mountain terrain would have made wheeled vehicles nearly useless anyway. Scholars believe that teams of workers dragged the stones up the mountain using ropes, wooden ramps, and sheer manpower, but the exact methods remain uncertain. Even more impressive is the hidden engineering beneath the visible city. Modern research suggests that roughly 60% of the construction at Machu Picchu lies underground. Beneath the plazas and buildings, the Inca engineers created layers of crushed rock, gravel, and sand that form an advanced drainage system. This design allows rainwater to pass safely through the foundations instead of pooling and destabilizing the structures. Considering that the region receives heavy rainfall throughout the year, such a system was essential to prevent landslides and structural collapse. In addition to drainage, the city contains an intricate network of water channels carved directly into the stone. A natural spring high on the mountain feeds a series of fountains that flow through the city in a carefully controlled sequence. Each fountain slightly lowers in elevation, allowing water to cascade gently from one basin to the next. The precision of these channels demonstrates a detailed understanding of gravity, hydrology, and terrain. For a civilization that left no written engineering manuals, The technical knowledge embedded in Machu Picchu is remarkable. The site also reveals evidence that the Inca closely observed the movements of the sun and stars. One of the most famous structures is the Intihuatana stone, a carved rock pillar aligned with specific astronomical events. During certain times of the year, especially around the equinoxes, the position of the sun causes shadows to shift in ways that appear deliberately calculated. Some researchers believe the stone functioned as a solar observation instrument, used to track seasonal cycles important for agriculture and religious ceremonies. Nearby temples also contain windows and doorways aligned with sunrise positions during solstices. These alignments suggest that Machu Picchu may have served not only as a royal retreat or ceremonial center, but also as a place where astronomy and ritual were closely connected. Most historians believe Machu Picchu was built during the reign of the Inca Emperor Pachacuti in the 15th century, a period when the empire was rapidly expanding across the Andes. It may have functioned as a royal estate, a sacred ceremonial center, or possibly a combination of both. However, the greatest mystery surrounding Machu Picchu is not why it was built, but why it was abandoned. Unlike other Inca cities that show signs of destruction or warfare, Machu Picchu appears to have been left behind peacefully. There is little evidence of battle fire or violent conflict. One theory suggests that diseases brought to South America by Europeans may have spread ahead of the Spanish conquest, weakening populations even in remote mountain regions. Another theory proposes that political instability within the Inca Empire caused people to relocate away from isolated royal estates. Yet none of these explanations fully accounts for the sudden disappearance of the community that once lived there. Today, Machu Picchu stands as one of the most remarkable archaeological sites on Earth. Its terraces still cling to the mountainside, its temples still frame the rising sun, and its stone walls remain locked together with the same precision they had 5 centuries ago. The city reminds us that ancient civilizations possessed sophisticated knowledge of architecture, astronomy, and environmental engineering long before modern technology existed. At the same time, Machu Picchu represents something more fragile: the vulnerability of knowledge itself. Entire cities, technologies, and traditions can vanish when societies collapse or when history forgets to record them. If Machu Picchu could remain hidden for centuries, silently preserved among the clouds of the Andes, it raises a haunting possibility. How many other achievements of the ancient world have been lost completely, waiting somewhere beneath forests, deserts, or mountains for someone to rediscover them? Yonaguni Monument. In the winter of 1986, a diver descended into the waters off the southern coast of Yonaguni Island, the westernmost inhabited island of Japan. The currents in this part of the Pacific are powerful. Visibility changes quickly. The seabed is rugged, shaped by centuries of storms and shifting tides. But during that dive, something unexpected appeared below the surface. Instead of irregular rock formations or scattered coral, the diver noticed something that looked strangely geometric. A massive stone platform, sharp edges, flat terraces, wide stair-like steps descending into the darkness. At first glance, it resembled the ruins of an enormous stone structure. Not a pile of collapsed blocks, but something that looked carefully shaped, almost architectural. What lay beneath the ocean near Yonaguni did not look like a typical natural reef. It looked like the remains of a monument. The formation lies about 25 meters below the surface of the sea, where powerful ocean currents sweep across the seabed. For centuries, ships passed through these waters without any knowledge of what lay below. Fishermen sailed over it. Storms moved above it. Generations lived and died on the island nearby without ever seeing it. Because the structure was not buried under sand or jungle, it was hidden under water. Only when modern scuba diving became common did humans begin exploring these submerged landscapes. Once divers started visiting the site regularly, photographs and videos began to circulate. The images showed massive stone terraces, long corridors, and sharp angular walls. Some observers immediately raised a startling possibility. What if this was not just an unusual rock formation? What if it was something much older, something built? The formation known as the Yonaguni Monument is enormous. Some of its stone platforms stretch more than 100 meters across. Certain terraces appear to rise in stacked levels like a giant step pyramid. The edges of many blocks meet at angles that appear remarkably straight. Some sections resemble staircases, others look like wide plazas or roads carved directly into the rock. Divers have pointed out several features that seem difficult to explain: large vertical faces that look almost cut, flat surfaces that extend for long distances, and rectangular formations that appear repeated throughout the structure. In several areas, long channels and trenches run between the stone platforms, creating corridors that seem unusually ordered. To some researchers, these shapes resemble architecture. To others, they are simply the result of natural geological fractures in sandstone that break along straight lines. But the scale of the site continues to surprise visitors. This is not a small formation. It is a massive structure carved directly into the seabed. And if it were ever above water, it would have stood as a monumental stone complex overlooking the Pacific Ocean. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Yonaguni Monument is its depth. Today, the structure sits roughly 25 meters beneath the ocean. But during the last ice age, sea levels were dramatically lower than they are today. Around 12,000 years ago, global sea levels began rising as massive ice sheets melted. Coastlines across the world were flooded. Entire landscapes disappeared beneath the ocean. If the Yonaguni Formation once stood above water, it would have existed during a time when human civilizations were only beginning to emerge from the final stages of the Ice Age. This possibility raises an extraordinary question. If the structure were artificial, it could potentially date back more than 10,000 years. That would place it far earlier than most known large-scale stone architecture, long before the pyramids of Egypt, long before the first cities of Mesopotamia. But proving such an idea is far from simple because the ocean has been reshaping the site for thousands of years. Since its discovery, the Yonaguni Monument has sparked intense debate among geologists and archaeologists. Some researchers argue that the formation is entirely natural. The region is composed of sedimentary rock that fractures along straight plains. Over time, erosion caused by ocean currents may have carved the rock into large terraces and sharp edges. In this view, the monument is not a ruin. It is a rare but natural geological formation. However, other observers remain unconvinced. They point to what appear to be aligned walls, right-angle corners, and platforms that resemble human construction. Some even suggest the site could represent the remains of an ancient coastal complex, a city or ceremonial structure that once stood on land before the sea rose. Yet no definitive artifacts have been found at the site. No pottery, no tools, no inscriptions, nothing that clearly proves human construction. The monument sits in a strange category between geology and archaeology, too geometric to ignore, too uncertain to confirm. Today, divers continued to descend to the Yonaguni Monument. They swim through its terraces and corridors following the lines of stone that disappear into the blue water. Some see a natural wonder shaped by the forces of geology. Others see the faint outline of a lost human structure. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. The oceans hide vast portions of the Earth's history. Entire coastlines have vanished beneath the rising seas. Ancient landscapes remain unexplored, and the Yonaguni Monument stands as a reminder of how much of the past may still lie hidden beneath the waves. Whether it is the work of nature or the echo of a forgotten civilization, the massive stone terraces off the coast of Yonaguni continue to raise a question that science has not yet fully answered. What exactly lies beneath the sea? Teotihuacan. Many centuries before Europeans set foot in the Americas, a massive city once stood on the high plateau of central Mexico that we now call Teotihuacan. But the strange thing is that when the Aztec civilization first encountered the place around the 14th century, the city had already been abandoned for a very long time. Enormous pyramids still stood towering in the valley. Perfectly straight avenues stretched for kilometers, but no people lived there anymore. No one remembered who had built it. The Aztecs named the place Teotihuacan, which means the place where the gods were born, because in their view only gods could have built a city of such scale and precision. At the center of the city stand two enormous pyramids, Pyramid of the Sun and Pyramid of the Moon, connected by an avenue more than 4 kilometers long that is now known as the Avenue of the Dead. But the deeper archaeologists study it, the more they realize that Teotihuacan was not simply an ancient city. It was one of the largest urban centers on Earth in its time. And the most mysterious part is this: we still do not know exactly who built it. After Teotihuacan was abandoned around the 7th century, the enormous city nearly disappeared from historical memory. There are no clear written records describing its founding. There are no chronicles explaining who the builders were. For centuries, the pyramids were covered by soil and vegetation. Some early explorers even believed they were simply natural hills. It was not until the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when large-scale archaeological excavations began, that the world slowly started to understand the true scale of this place. Surveys revealed that Teotihuacan had once been a massive ancient metropolis with a population that may have reached more than 100,000 people, an enormous number for that era. But what is even more remarkable is the way the city was designed. Unlike many ancient cities that grew organically over time, Teotihuacan appears to have been planned from the beginning according to a highly precise overall blueprint. When archaeologists began measuring the entire city, they discovered something unusual. The whole of Teotihuacan was built according to an extremely precise geometric grid system. Most structures in the city are aligned in the same direction, tilted about 15 degrees from true north. This alignment was not random. Some studies suggest that the orientation of the city may be connected to astronomical events, particularly the position of the sun at important times of the year. But that is only part of the story. The Pyramid of the Sun, one of the largest structures in the ancient Americas, rises about 65 meters high and was constructed using millions of stone blocks. The total volume of material used is estimated to exceed 1 million tons. What is astonishing is that all of these structures were built without metal tools, without wheeled transport, and without draft animals. Some researchers have also noticed that the layout of Teotihuacan contains very unusual geometric proportions. The distances between pyramids, plazas, and avenues appear to follow a standardized measurement system applied throughout the entire city. This suggests that the builders of this place did not only possess extraordinary architectural skills, but also had a remarkably advanced system of urban planning. And all of this happened nearly 2,000 years ago. Teotihuacan flourished from roughly the 1st century to the 6th century CE. At its peak, it may have been the 6th largest city in the world. Its influence spread throughout Mesoamerica. Artifacts and architectural styles associated with Teotihuacan have been discovered in many other cultures, including the Maya civilization. This suggests that it was not merely a city. It may have been the most powerful center in the entire region. But then around the 7th century, something happened. Archaeological evidence shows that many areas of the city were burned. Several palaces and temples were destroyed. After that, the population appears to have declined dramatically, and eventually the city was completely abandoned. No historical record clearly explains what happened. Some theories suggest internal rebellion. Others propose that prolonged drought caused the social system to collapse. But whatever the cause, the result was the same. One of the largest cities of the ancient world vanished with almost no explanation. Today, the ruins of Teotihuacan still lie silently in the Valley of Mexico. Millions of visitors walk along the Avenue of the Dead each year, looking up at pyramids that have stood for nearly 2 millennia. Yet many important questions remain unanswered. Who were the people who designed a city with such astonishing geometric precision? How were they able to construct these enormous pyramids with the technology available at the time? And why did a city that once served as the center of power for an entire region disappear from history, almost without a trace? Teotihuacan reminds us that human history is not always fully recorded. Sometimes the greatest achievements of our species are buried by time. And in the case of Teotihuacan, perhaps the greatest mystery is not how the city was built, but why a civilization capable of creating such a magnificent urban center could vanish from history almost entirely. Antikythera mechanism. Sometime around the middle of the 1st century BCE, a Roman cargo vessel was making its way through the eastern Mediterranean. The ship was heavily loaded with valuable goods from the Greek world: bronze statues, luxury glassware, jewelry, and amphoras filled with wine. Its destination was likely one of the wealthy Roman ports, where such treasures were in high demand. But the journey ended abruptly in the waters near the small Greek island of Antikythera. Caught in dangerous seas, the vessel sank, scattering its cargo across the seabed more than 40 meters below the surface. For nearly 2,000 years, the wreck remained untouched. Bronze statues lay toppled across the ocean floor. Amphoras were buried in sand, and fragments of metal slowly corroded in the salt water. Among those fragments was an object that looked completely ordinary. A lump of bronze no larger than a book, cracked and heavily corroded after centuries underwater. Nothing about it suggested that it might contain one of the most sophisticated technological devices ever created in the ancient world. Yet hidden inside that corroded mass was a system of gears so precise and complex that historians would later struggle to understand how such a machine could have existed in antiquity. The wreck was discovered by accident in 1900. When Greek sponge divers exploring the seabed near Antikythera stumbled upon scattered statues and artifacts. As they began recovering objects from the wreck, archaeologists realized they had found one of the richest ancient shipwrecks ever discovered. Alongside statues and pottery were several strange fragments of bronze containing gear-like shapes embedded within them. At first, these fragments puzzled researchers. They were catalogued and transported to museums in Athens, but no one could explain what they were. For decades, the pieces sat quietly among other artifacts from the wreck. They were too damaged to identify clearly, and few researchers suspected that they might belong to something extraordinary. It was not until 1951 that a historian of science named Derek de Solla Price began studying the fragments carefully. What he saw immediately raised new questions. Inside the corroded metal were interlocking gears carefully cut with evenly spaced teeth. Such precision suggested that the fragments were part of a machine, something far more advanced than a decorative object or mechanical curiosity. As researchers examined the fragments more closely, the scale of the discovery slowly emerged. The object turned out to be part of a complex mechanical device now known as the Antikythera mechanism. When reconstructed, the device appears to have contained more than 30 bronze gears arranged within a small wooden case roughly the size of a modern book. Turning a small handle on the side of the device would cause the gears to rotate, moving a series of pointers across engraved dials on the front and back panels. These dials represented astronomical cycles. By rotating the gears, the mechanism could calculate the positions of the sun and moon in the sky. It could also track the phases of the moon and predict eclipses using known cycles such as the Saros cycle. Some inscriptions on the device even appear to reference the timing of major Greek athletic festivals, including the Olympic Games. In effect, the mechanism functioned as a mechanical model of the cosmos, a device capable of representing astronomical patterns through a system of precisely coordinated gears. What makes this discovery so surprising is the time period in which it was built. Mechanical systems using complex gear trains were long believed to have emerged much later in history, particularly during the development of medieval clockmaking in Europe. Yet the Antikythera mechanism dates to around the 2nd or 1st century BCE. That places it more than 1,000 years earlier than many comparable mechanical devices. The existence of the Antikythera mechanism raises an important historical question. Where did such advanced technology come from? Ancient Greek scholars were deeply engaged in astronomy and mathematics, and thinkers such as Archimedes were known to experiment with mechanical devices. Some historians believe that the mechanism may have emerged from scientific traditions connected to major intellectual centers such as the Library of Alexandria, where mathematicians and astronomers studied celestial motion with remarkable sophistication. However, the Antikythera mechanism presents a strange paradox. No earlier machines with the same level of mechanical complexity have been discovered, and for centuries afterward there is little evidence of similar devices being produced. In other words, the mechanism appears almost alone in the archaeological record. It seems to represent a level of engineering that was briefly achieved and then lost. This absence of technological continuity is one of the most intriguing aspects of the discovery. If ancient engineers could design and construct such intricate gear systems, why are there no surviving examples of similar machines? Were they extremely rare scientific instruments produced only for elite scholars? Or did entire traditions of mechanical engineering disappear during the political upheavals that reshaped the ancient Mediterranean world? Today, the Antikythera mechanism is widely regarded as one of the most important technological artifacts ever recovered from antiquity. Modern imaging techniques, including advanced X-ray scans, have allowed scientists to reconstruct much of its internal structure without dismantling the fragile fragments. These studies reveal a device of extraordinary ingenuity, combining mathematical knowledge, astronomical observation, and precise craftsmanship within a compact mechanical system. The mechanism challenges long-standing assumptions about ancient technology. It shows that engineers of the Hellenistic world were capable of designing complex machines that could model the movements of celestial bodies with impressive accuracy. Yet it also reminds us how fragile knowledge can be. When civilizations change, when libraries are destroyed, and when scientific traditions fade, entire fields of knowledge can vanish with them. For almost 2,000 years, the Antikythera mechanism lay hidden on the seabed, its gears locked in silence beneath layers of corrosion. If the shipwreck near Antikythera had never been discovered, historians might never have known that such a machine had ever existed. And that possibility leads to a final question that continues to intrigue researchers and historians alike. If one device like this could disappear from history for 2 millennia, how many other remarkable inventions from the ancient world might still remain hidden, waiting to be rediscovered? Hattusilian Gate. Around the 13th century BCE on the high Anatolian plateau, a powerful city stood behind massive stone walls that stretched for kilometers across the hills. This city was Hattusa, the capital of the Hittite Empire, a kingdom strong enough to challenge the great powers of the ancient world. Its walls were enormous, built from stone blocks weighing several tons, forming a defensive system designed to protect one of the most important cities of the Bronze Age. but along the southwestern section of those walls stood a gate that was unlike any other. Two enormous stone lions guarded the entrance, carved directly into massive blocks of limestone. Their eyes stare outward toward the landscape, their jaws slightly open, their bodies tense as if frozen in the act of protecting the city. Today, this entrance is known as the Hattusa Lion Gate, and although thousands of years have passed, the sculptures remain strikingly clear. The stone surfaces still carry sharp lines and deliberate shapes, and the symmetry between the two guardians is unmistakable. What appears at first to be a simple defensive gate slowly reveals something more remarkable. The lions are not rough carvings. They are carefully designed sculptures integrated into a monumental architectural structure, created with a level of control that raises a surprising question. How did Bronze Age builders achieve this level of precision in stone? When the Hittite Empire collapsed around 1200 BCE, the city of Hattusa was abandoned. Its palaces burned, its temples fell into ruin, and its vast walls gradually disappeared beneath soil, vegetation, and time. For centuries, the once powerful capital faded from memory. The Lion Gate remained standing, but the civilization that created it had vanished from history. For nearly 3,000 years, the stone lions continued to face outward across the Anatolian hills, guarding a city that no longer existed. Only in the 19th century did archaeologists begin to uncover the site again. Excavations at Bogaskale slowly revealed the immense scale of the ancient city, kilometers of fortification walls, monumental gateways, administrative buildings, and archives written in cuneiform tablets. Among all these discoveries, the Lion Gate immediately stood out. The sculptures were not only impressive in size but also unusually refined in their execution. Researchers began to notice that the two lions were designed with striking symmetry. Their bodies mirror each other almost perfectly, from the position of the paws to the curve of the mane and the structure of the jaw. This was not the work of random decoration. It was the result of deliberate planning and skilled craftsmanship embedded within the architecture of the gate itself. A closer examination of the structure reveals why the Lion Gate continues to fascinate archaeologists. The gateway is built from massive limestone blocks that were carefully cut and positioned to form a stable passage through the city wall. Each lion is carved directly into the stone blocks that make up the gate, meaning the sculptures are not separate statues but integral parts of the structure. This integration required builders to plan both the engineering of the wall and the artistic design of the sculptures at the same time. The carving itself shows controlled, confident tool marks that suggest experienced stoneworkers using metal tools with considerable precision. Yet during the 13th century BCE, the Hittite world existed firmly within the Bronze Age. Iron tools were still rare and steel did not yet exist. Creating deep, clean cuts in hard limestone using bronze tools would have required remarkable skill, patience, and knowledge of stoneworking techniques. Even more impressive is the careful balance between artistry and structure. The lions had to look powerful and symbolic while still preserving the strength of the gateway. Their bodies were shaped so that large sections of the stone remained intact, preventing structural weakness in the blocks supporting the wall. In other words, the sculptures were not simply decorative carvings. They were carefully engineered forms that served both aesthetic and architectural purposes. Historians believe the lions also carried symbolic meaning. Across many ancient cultures, lions represented authority, protection, and royal power. Placing two monumental lions at the entrance to the city would have created a powerful psychological effect. Anyone approaching Hattusa would pass between these guardians before entering the capital of the Hittite kingdom. The message was clear: this was a city protected not only by walls, but by the strength and authority of the empire itself. Yet despite this clear symbolism, the Lion Gate also presents a historical puzzle. The Hittites clearly possessed advanced skills in architecture, urban planning, and monumental stone carving. Their capital city demonstrates sophisticated engineering and artistic design. However, after the collapse of their empire, much of this tradition seems to disappear. Later cultures in the region built impressive structures of their own, but the specific combination of monumental architecture and large-scale sculptural guardians seen at Hattusa does not appear in a continuous line of development. There is no long sequence of earlier prototypes leading to the Lion Gate, and there are few later examples that directly continue the same tradition. It appears in history almost suddenly reaches an impressive level of sophistication and then fades from the archaeological record after the destruction of the Hittite world. Today, the two stone lions still stand where they were carved more than 3,000 years ago. Empires have risen and fallen since the days of Hattusa, but the guardians of the gate remain silent witnesses to a lost civilization. The artisans who shaped them are unknown, their names lost to history, yet their work still communicates across the centuries. The Lion Gate is more than a piece of ancient architecture. It is a reminder of how advanced the knowledge and craftsmanship of ancient societies could be, and how fragile that knowledge can be when civilizations collapse. When the Hittite Empire disappeared, something else may have disappeared with it, a tradition of engineering and artistic skill that the world would not fully rediscover until many centuries later. Karahan Tepe. In southeastern Turkey, on a dry rocky plateau not far from the famous ancient site of Göbekli Tepe, there is a place that for thousands of years appeared to be nothing more than an ordinary hill. There were no walls, no monuments, and no visible signs of an ancient civilization. Just stone. But in the early 21st century, when archaeologists began surveying the area more carefully, they realized that the rock beneath their feet was not entirely natural. Massive stone blocks slowly began to emerge from the ground. T-shaped pillars appeared carved with astonishing precision. Gradually, a shocking truth began to take shape. The seemingly anonymous hill was hiding an ancient ritual complex more than 11,000 years old. Today, this place is known as Karahan Tepe. It is a structure built before the Egyptian pyramids, before Stonehenge, and even before humans were believed to have invented agriculture. Questions began to appear almost immediately. If people of that era were still hunter-gatherer communities, then who built such a complex stone structure after it was constructed roughly 11,000 years ago? Karahan Tepe appears to have vanished from history. No ancient texts mention it. No legends speak of it. No later civilization claimed to have built it. Over time, sand and earth slowly buried the entire complex. For thousands of years, Karahan Tepe slept beneath the soil. The world had no idea that one of the oldest monumental stone constructions in human history lay hidden beneath the thin surface of the Anatolian plateau. Only when modern archaeological surveys began in the early 21st century did the first signs emerge. Researchers soon realized that Karahan Tepe was not an isolated site. It was part of a wider network of ancient locations known as Tas Tepeler, stretching across dozens of kilometers. What truly surprised scientists, however, was what they found beneath the soil. The remains revealed a deliberately designed architectural layout, a complex ceremonial structure, and a level of stone craftsmanship that seemed to exceed what we normally associate with prehistoric societies. The structures uncovered at Karahan Tepe demonstrate an astonishing level of technical skill. Across the site stand T-shaped stone pillars more than 2 meters tall, carved directly out of the natural limestone bedrock. Some of these pillars weigh several tons. Yet the most remarkable detail is not only their size. The stone surfaces were smoothed with striking precision, and many pillars are decorated with carved images of animals, snakes, foxes, birds, and other mysterious creatures. In one particular structure, archaeologists discovered a circular chamber containing more than 10 stone pillars arranged in a ring. At the center stands a larger pillar, almost like a ceremonial axis. The layout suggests that this was not a simple settlement. It may have been a ritual center, a gathering place, a location that held spiritual significance for communities living more than 10,000 years ago. But the most shocking element is the sense of anachronism, the idea that the site appears far ahead of its time. Karahan Tepe was built around 9000 BCE. That means it predates the Great Pyramid of Giza by roughly 6,000 years, Stonehenge by around 5,000 years, and even the earliest known cities of human civilization. According to traditional historical models, small hunter-gatherer societies should not have been capable of organizing large construction projects like this. Yet Karahan Tepe suggests the opposite. A prehistoric community without metal tools, without the wheel, and perhaps even without agriculture, appears to have organized the quarrying of stone, the transport of enormous blocks, and the construction of complex ceremonial structures. Some archaeologists believe that Karahan Tepe and the surrounding sites may represent a turning point in human history. Instead of agriculture creating cities and religion, it is possible that ritual centers like Karahan Tepe brought people together, encouraged cooperation, and eventually led to the development of agriculture itself. In other words, temples may have appeared before cities. But this idea introduces a troubling paradox. If complex stone constructions like Karahan Tepe existed more than 11,000 years ago, why does the historical record not show a continuous development of this technology afterward? In many parts of the world, monumental stone architecture appears thousands of years later. Between Karahantepe and the later civilizations of antiquity, there is a puzzling gap. There are no clear intermediate stages, no obvious architectural ancestors, and no visible line of technological evolution. This absence has led some researchers to ask uncomfortable questions. Are we underestimating the capabilities of prehistoric societies? Or could it be that a large part of human history has simply been lost buried beneath the earth, just as Karahantepe itself once was? Today, only a small portion of Karahantepe has been excavated. Much of the complex still lies beneath the ground. That means the most important discoveries may still be waiting. Yet even with what has already been uncovered, Karahantepe has begun to change the way we think about the ancient past. It suggests that more than 11,000 years ago, humans were not merely wandering bands of hunters. They were capable of organization, creativity, and the construction of structures that carried deep meaning. The stone pillars of Karahantepe have stood for thousands of years. They existed before the first cities were built, before history was written, and perhaps even before humans fully understood themselves. The final question remains, is Karahantepe simply a rare exception, or is it the surviving trace of a chapter of human history that humanity has completely forgotten? Persepolis. In 330 BCE, flames rose into the night sky above the ancient ceremonial capital of the Persian Empire, Persepolis. The vast palaces built of cedar and stone burned as the city that had symbolized imperial power for nearly 2 centuries was consumed by fire. According to ancient accounts, the destruction came after the armies of Alexander the Great captured the city. During a night of celebration and drinking, a decision was made that would erase one of the greatest capitals of the ancient world. The flames spread through the royal complex, destroying archives, treasures, and the wooden roofs of immense halls supported by towering stone columns. Yet when the fire died and the smoke cleared, something extraordinary remained behind. Rising above the scorched ruins were massive terraces of stone, perfectly carved stairways, and monumental columns that seemed designed to endure long after the empire that built them had vanished. Persepolis was not merely a palace complex. It appeared to be a monumental statement in stone built with such precision and scale that even centuries of destruction could not erase it. After its destruction, Persepolis slowly disappeared from the living memory of the world. Wind and sand swept across the Iranian plateau, gradually covering parts of the ruins, while the fallen columns and carved stones lay silent under the open sky. For centuries, travelers passed through the region and encountered the strange remains of enormous structures whose origins were unclear. Some believed the ruins belonged to mythical kings mentioned in ancient legends. Others thought they were remnants of a city built by supernatural beings. Without written records that could easily be read, the true identity of the site faded into mystery. It was not until the 17th century that European travelers began documenting the ruins more carefully, sketching the strange carvings and inscriptions they found on the stones. The symbols etched into the walls and stairways were eventually recognized as ancient Persian cuneiform. By the 19th century, scholars had begun to decipher these inscriptions, revealing that the ruins were indeed Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the mighty Achaemenid Empire. When systematic archaeological excavations finally began, researchers realized that the site was far more than a ruined city. It was an enormous architectural complex whose engineering, symbolism, and artistic detail reflected the administrative power and cultural diversity of one of the largest empires the ancient world had ever seen. At the heart of Persepolis lies a colossal artificial terrace carved into the base of a mountain. This stone platform covers more than 125,000 square meters and was constructed using enormous limestone blocks carefully fitted together with remarkable precision. Instead of building directly on uneven terrain, Persian engineers reshaped the landscape itself, creating a perfectly leveled foundation for the royal complex. One of the most striking architectural elements of Persepolis is the monumental staircase leading to the great audience hall known as the Apadana Palace. The steps are unusually shallow and wide, a design that allowed large ceremonial processions to ascend the platform gracefully. Delegations representing dozens of cultures within the empire would climb these steps during official ceremonies, carrying gifts and tribute for the Persian king. On the walls beside these stairways, hundreds of detailed relief carvings depict these delegations in extraordinary detail. Each group is shown wearing distinctive clothing and carrying objects representing their homeland. Some bring finely woven textiles. Others bring precious metals, animals, or elaborately crafted vessels. The level of detail is astonishing. The folds of garments, braided hair, facial features, and cultural differences between the peoples of the empire are all rendered with remarkable accuracy in hard stone. The columns of Persepolis are equally impressive. Some once rose nearly 20 meters into the air, topped with sculpted capitals shaped like powerful bulls or lions. These capitals supported massive wooden beams that formed the roof structures of the palace halls. The engineering required to lift and position such enormous elements remains impressive even by modern standards. Archaeological evidence also reveals complex drainage systems beneath the terrace and carefully planned structural foundations designed to stabilize the massive buildings above. When examined closely, Persepolis reveals itself not only as an artistic masterpiece, but also as an advanced feat of ancient engineering and urban planning. Persepolis began construction around 518 BCE under the rule of Darius I, who envisioned it as a ceremonial center representing the unity and power of his empire. Unlike other capitals that functioned primarily as administrative hubs, Persepolis served a symbolic role. It was the place where representatives from across the empire gathered during major festivals to acknowledge the authority of the Persian king. Later rulers, including Xerxes I, expanded the complex by adding new gates, halls, and monumental sculptures. Thousands of workers, artisans, and engineers from across the empire contributed to its construction. Records discovered at the site indicate that workers were organized, paid, and supplied with food rations in a structured administrative system that reflects the sophisticated bureaucracy of the Persian state. Yet Persepolis also presents a historical paradox. Despite its immense scale and symbolic importance, the city was never rebuilt after its destruction by Alexander's forces. Many ancient capitals were destroyed and later restored or replaced by successor states, but Persepolis remained largely abandoned. No later empire recreated a ceremonial complex quite like it, and the architectural tradition it represented seems to have faded with the fall of the Achaemenid dynasty. This raises a compelling question. If Persepolis represented such a powerful expression of imperial identity and architectural skill, why did no later civilization attempt to replicate its concept or rebuild its grandeur? Today, the towering columns and carved stairways of Persepolis still stand against the Iranian landscape, silent witnesses to more than 2,000 years of history. Though the wooden roofs and royal treasures vanished long ago, the stone structures continue to tell the story of a civilization that once connected vast regions of the ancient world. The reliefs carved into its walls preserve images of dozens of cultures that existed under the Persian Empire, reminding us that Persepolis was not merely a palace, but a symbolic center of a vast and diverse realm. The ruins demonstrate that ancient engineers and artists possessed a level of technical skill and organizational ability that continues to impress modern researchers. Yet the fate of Persepolis also carries a deeper lesson. Even the most magnificent centers of power can disappear within a single generation, leaving behind only fragments of stone and echoes of a lost world. What remains on the plateau today is not simply the ruin of a city, but the enduring memory of an empire whose vision was once carved into the very foundations of the earth. Great Pyramid of Giza. Around 2560 BCE, on a plateau of limestone rising from the western edge of the Nile Valley, an enormous structure began to take shape. Block by block, workers lifted massive stones into the desert sky. Some weighed 2 tons, others more than 15. In total, more than 2.3 million stones were placed into position, with a precision so remarkable that the gaps between them are often thinner than a sheet of paper. The structure they were building would become known as the Great Pyramid of Giza, the largest pyramid ever constructed in ancient Egypt and the monumental tomb of the pharaoh Khufu. Today, it is one of the most recognizable landmarks on Earth. Yet even in antiquity, visitors who stood before it were confronted with the same quiet mystery. There are no surviving architectural blueprints describing its design. There is no detailed written account explaining exactly how it was constructed. What remains instead is the monument itself, a geometric mountain of stone rising from the desert, silently challenging every generation that studies it. The pyramid appears simple from a distance, but the closer one looks, the more difficult it becomes to understand how a civilization, more than 4,000 years ago, achieved such extraordinary precision. For thousands of years, the Great Pyramid stood as an accepted wonder of the world. Greek historians such as Herodotus wrote about it. Roman travelers measured its enormous base. Medieval explorers climbed its sides and described its vast interior corridors. Yet none of them truly understood how it had been built. Even as modern archaeology began to develop during the 19th century, the pyramid continued to guard its secrets. Explorers mapped its internal passageways and chambers, revealing structures such as the King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber, and the towering Grand Gallery that rises deep inside the pyramid's core. Each discovery added new pieces to the puzzle, but it also created new questions. No clear evidence of massive construction machinery was ever found. There were no iron tools capable of cutting granite with modern efficiency. There were no surviving records describing the logistical methods used to move millions of heavy stones across the desert. For long stretches of time, the pyramid seemed less like an engineering project and more like a silent artifact whose builders had taken their knowledge with them into history. The monument endured, but the practical details of its creation appeared to have vanished. When scientists began to analyze the Great Pyramid carefully, the measurements revealed something extraordinary. The pyramid originally stood about 146 meters tall, roughly the height of a modern 40-story building. For nearly 4,000 years, it remained the tallest human-made structure on Earth. Yet height alone does not explain why the pyramid continues to astonish engineers. Its real marvel lies in its precision. The four sides of the pyramid are aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal directions of the Earth, north, south, east, and west, with an error of only about 0.05 degrees. Achieving such accuracy without modern surveying instruments would be difficult even today. The outer casing stones, which were once polished limestone, were cut so precisely that the joints between them were nearly invisible. Many of the interior blocks were positioned with extraordinary accuracy despite their immense weight. Deep within the structure lies the Grand Gallery, a long ascending corridor almost 9 meters high, built with carefully angled stone courses that distribute the enormous pressure of the pyramid above. At the center of the structure lies the King's Chamber, constructed entirely from massive blocks of red granite transported from Aswan nearly 800 kilometers to the south. Some of these granite blocks weigh as much as 70 tons. Above this chamber are 5 hidden relieving chambers, stacked layers of stone designed to redirect the crushing weight of the pyramid away from the ceiling below. Modern engineers now recognize that these chambers function as a highly sophisticated structural solution. Their purpose is to prevent the chamber from collapsing under the pressure of millions of tons of stone. What makes this even more remarkable is that similar architectural solutions would not appear in many later civilizations for centuries. In other words, the pyramid demonstrates a level of structural understanding that seems surprisingly advanced for its era. Most historians agree that the Great Pyramid was constructed during the height of Egypt's Old Kingdom, when royal authority was powerful enough to organize enormous labor forces. Tens of thousands of workers, stonecutters, transport crews, engineers and administrators may have participated in the project over several decades. Many theories attempt to explain how the pyramid was built. Some scholars propose long earthen ramps used to drag the blocks upward as the pyramid rose. Others suggest spiral ramps or complex lifting systems. While archaeological evidence supports some aspects of these ideas, no single theory has yet explained every detail of the construction process. But perhaps the most puzzling fact is what happened after the Great Pyramid was completed. Egypt continued to build pyramids for centuries. However, none of the later pyramids matched the scale, precision, or structural complexity of Khufu's monument. Some later pyramids even collapsed partially because of weaker construction techniques. This creates a historical paradox. If Egyptian engineers once possessed the knowledge required to build the Great Pyramid with such precision, why did later generations appear unable to reproduce it at the same level? The technology was not gradually improved over time. Instead, it seemed to reach an extraordinary peak and then fade. Today, the Great Pyramid of Giza remains one of the oldest standing structures on Earth. For more than 400–500 years, it has watched empires rise and disappear. Cities have grown and vanished, languages have evolved, and entire civilizations have been forgotten. Yet the pyramid continues to stand exactly where its builders placed it. It is more than a royal tomb. It is a reminder that ancient societies were capable of achievements far beyond what earlier historians once imagined. The monument demonstrates that knowledge, organization, and engineering skill existed in the distant past at levels we are still trying to fully understand. Perhaps the most intriguing question is not simply how the pyramid was built. The deeper question is how much knowledge from that world has been lost. History preserves monuments far more easily than it preserves the ideas that created them. And as the centuries passed, the techniques and traditions behind the Great Pyramid may have slowly disappeared, along with the people who mastered them. The pyramid still stands silent and immovable in the desert sun. But the knowledge that raised those stones into the sky may have faded long ago, leaving behind one of the greatest enigmas of the ancient world. Sacsayhuaman. In the year 1533, the world of the Inca Empire was collapsing. Spanish forces had entered the ancient capital of Cusco, and the heart of one of the most powerful civilizations in the Americas was falling apart piece by piece. Yet above the city, on a high rocky ridge overlooking the valley, something enormous still stood untouched. It was not a palace or a temple. It was a massive stone complex built from blocks so large that even the Spanish soldiers who had crossed oceans and conquered cities struggled to comprehend it. This place was Sacsayhuaman, a fortress whose walls seemed almost impossible. The stones were enormous, some weighing well over 100 tons. But the true mystery was not their size. It was how they fit together. Each stone connected perfectly with the others, forming joints so precise that even a thin blade could barely slide between them. No mortar held the structure together. No metal clamps locked the blocks in place. Instead, the stones themselves formed a seamless structure that appeared both natural and engineered. The Spanish dismantled many Inca structures throughout the region to reuse the stones for colonial buildings, churches, and houses. Yet Sacsayhuaman proved different. The stones were simply too massive to move, too complex to replicate, and too difficult to destroy. So the fortress remained silently watching the centuries pass. For a long time, Sacsayhuaman was simply regarded as an impressive ruin. Travelers described it briefly, and local communities lived around it, as they had for generations. Many smaller stones were removed over the centuries, but the massive core walls remained exactly where they had been placed hundreds of years earlier. It was not until modern archaeology began examining Inca engineering more carefully in the 20th century that the site started attracting serious scientific attention. Researchers measured the angles of the walls and mapped the individual blocks. Engineers studied how the stones were arranged and how the structure responded to seismic activity. The more carefully scientists examined the fortress, the more puzzling it became. The Inca civilization did not use iron tools. They had no cranes, no wheeled vehicles for heavy transport, and no large draft animals capable of pulling enormous loads. Yet somehow they had quarried, transported, carved, and assembled stones that weighed as much as modern construction equipment. The walls themselves are built using a technique often called cyclopean masonry. Instead of cutting stones into simple rectangular blocks, the builders shaped each stone individually, giving them complex polygonal forms with multiple angles and edges. Some stones have 10 or even 12 sides, and each side had to align perfectly with the surrounding blocks. When the stones were fitted together, they formed a kind of natural mechanical lock. The irregular shapes prevented the stones from sliding or shifting easily, creating a structure that distributed weight and pressure across the entire wall. The result is a system of extraordinary stability. Even more remarkable is how these walls behave during earthquakes. The Andes region is highly seismic, and the city of Cusco has experienced numerous powerful earthquakes throughout history. Colonial buildings constructed by the Spanish were damaged or destroyed multiple times. Yet the Inca stonework at Sacsayhuaman remains standing. Because the stones are not rigidly bonded with mortar, they can shift slightly during seismic vibrations and then settle back into place afterward. Modern engineers describe this behavior as a form of passive earthquake resistance, a principle that many contemporary structures attempt to replicate. Despite decades of research, scholars still debate exactly how the Inca achieved such precise stonework. One theory suggests that the builders used harder stones as hammer tools, gradually shaping the surfaces through repeated impact and grinding. Sand and water may have been used as abrasives to polish the contact surfaces until the stones fit together perfectly. Another possibility involves carefully marking contact points between stones and repeatedly adjusting the surfaces until they interlocked precisely. But even with these explanations, the level of precision remains astonishing. Some joints between the stones are so exact that the contact surfaces appear almost polished. The construction would have required immense labor, extraordinary patience, and a deep understanding of geometry and material behavior. Historically, Sacsayhuaman is believed to have been built during the reign of the Inca Emperor Pachacuti in the 15th century during the height of the Inca Empire. The complex likely served multiple purposes: a defensive fortress protecting the capital, a ceremonial center, and possibly a symbolic architectural representation of imperial power. Yet its scale raises profound questions. The stones used in the walls were quarried several kilometers away and then transported across rugged terrain to the construction site. Without wheeled vehicles or metal machinery, workers would have relied on ropes, ramps, wooden rollers, and sheer human labor. Spanish chroniclers described enormous teams of workers pulling stones with thick cables while others stabilized the blocks along prepared earth ramps. But even with thousands of workers, modern researchers still struggle to fully reconstruct the logistics of moving stones weighing hundreds of tons across uneven Andean landscapes. Another puzzle remains even more intriguing. Sacsayhuaman is not the only site in the Andes where such extraordinary stonework appears. Other Inca locations, including Machu Picchu, display similar techniques of perfectly fitted polygonal masonry. The builders clearly possessed a sophisticated architectural tradition capable of producing extremely stable structures in a difficult seismic environment. Yet after the fall of the Inca Empire, that knowledge largely disappeared. There are no surviving manuals describing the methods used to shape or transport the stones. No detailed records explain the construction sequence, and the precise craftsmanship seen in Sacsayhuaman was never replicated again at the same scale. Today, the fortress still towers above Cusco, its zigzagging walls stretching across the hillside like the spine of some enormous stone creature. Each block remains exactly where it was placed centuries ago, resisting earthquakes, storms, and time itself. For archaeologists and engineers, Sacsayhuaman is more than an ancient ruin. It is a monument to the ingenuity of a civilization that mastered its environment in ways we are still trying to understand. The stones stand as silent evidence of knowledge that once existed but was never fully recorded. And as visitors walk along the massive walls and trace the perfectly fitted joints with their hands, one question continues to echo through the Andes. How much did the Inca truly know about engineering, geometry, and construction, and how much of that knowledge vanished when their world collapsed? Baalbek. In 1751, two British scholars, Robert Wood and James Dawkins, traveled through the Bekaa Valley in modern-day Lebanon. During their journey, they encountered the vast ruins of Baalbek, one of the most monumental archaeological sites in the ancient world. Towering columns from the Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek still rose high above the landscape, remnants of what had once been one of the largest temple complexes ever built by the Roman Empire. At first glance, the ruins seemed like the remains of a typical Roman city. However, as the scholars examined the foundations more closely, they noticed something deeply unusual hidden within the massive platform supporting the temple. Embedded in the western retaining wall were three enormous limestone blocks placed side by side with extraordinary precision. Each of these stones measured roughly 20 meters in length, nearly 4 meters in height, and weighed close to 800 tons. The blocks were so precisely fitted together that even today it is nearly impossible to slide a blade between the joints. These stones are now known as the trilithon. At first they appear to be simply enormous construction blocks, but the moment their scale is understood, a disturbing question emerges. How did ancient builders move and position stones weighing hundreds of tons with such precision? For centuries, the ruins of Baalbek stood quietly in the Bekaa Valley. After the decline of the Roman Empire, the once magnificent city gradually fell into ruin. Earthquakes toppled columns, sand buried parts of the structures, and the city slowly faded into obscurity. Local communities lived among the ruins for generations, seeing the colossal stones every day without truly understanding their significance. Baalbek remained largely ignored by scholars until the 18th and 19th centuries, when European explorers and archaeologists began documenting the site more systematically. As research continued, the true scale of the engineering involved began to emerge. The trilithon blocks, already astonishing in size, were not the only massive stones associated with the site. Just a short distance away in an ancient quarry lies an even larger block known today as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman. This unfinished monolith weighs approximately 1,000 tons. More recent excavations have revealed additional stones in the same quarry that may weigh as much as 1,600 tons. These blocks appear to have been partially cut but never transported to the temple platform. Their presence suggests that the builders of Baalbek were capable of handling stones on a scale rarely seen anywhere else in the ancient world. Yet, for reasons still unknown, some of the largest blocks were never used. The true mystery of Baalbek becomes clear when examining the engineering involved in constructing the temple platform. The 3 trilithon blocks alone weigh around 800 tons each. To put this into perspective, a fully loaded Boeing 747 weighs roughly 400 tons, meaning each stone is about twice the weight of one of the largest passenger aircraft ever built. Yet these stones were not simply dragged across the ground. They were lifted and positioned approximately 7 meters above the surrounding terrain as part of the temple's retaining wall. Moving stones of this scale would challenge even modern engineering projects. Historians believe Roman builders may have used massive earthen ramps, wooden rollers, and complex pulley systems operated by hundreds of laborers. However, even with these techniques, many engineers still struggle to explain how such enormous blocks could have been lifted and placed with the level of precision visible today. Modern studies using laser scanning and structural analysis have shown that the surfaces of the stones were cut extremely flat, allowing them to sit tightly together without mortar. This level of precision indicates not only extraordinary logistical capabilities, but also highly advanced stone-cutting techniques. Most historians attribute the monumental temple complex of Baalbek to Roman construction during the 1st century BCE and the following centuries. The Romans were among the greatest builders of the ancient world, responsible for roads, aqueducts, amphitheaters, and massive public monuments across their empire. However, Baalbek presents a significant historical paradox. In most Roman architecture, building stones typically weigh between 2 and 10 tons, with occasional blocks reaching several dozen tons. Stones approaching the scale of the trilithon are almost unheard of in other Roman projects. This has led some researchers to suggest that the foundation platform of Baalbek may predate Roman construction. According to this theory, the Romans may have built their temple complex on top of an even older foundation, created by an earlier civilization. If this idea is correct, it raises an even deeper mystery. Who originally designed and constructed this enormous platform? And why does no comparable structure appear elsewhere in the archaeological record? Today, the ruins of Baalbek remain one of the most impressive archaeological sites in the Middle East. The towering columns of the Temple of Jupiter testify to the power and ambition of the Roman Empire. Yet the greatest mystery of the site lies not in the temples themselves, but in the gigantic stones hidden within their foundations. These blocks stand as silent evidence of engineering achievements that continue to challenge modern understanding. They remind us that ancient civilizations often possess skills and knowledge that we are only beginning to rediscover. Perhaps one day archaeologists and engineers will fully understand how the builders of Baalbek transported and positioned stones weighing hundreds of tons. Or perhaps part of that knowledge vanished with the people who built the monument thousands of years ago. If that is the case, Baalbek is more than just an ancient ruin. It is a reminder that human knowledge is fragile and that even the greatest achievements of a civilization can fade into mystery when history is lost.